Matthews, you believe in God and in the strong sense that God controls the flow of all history. In that worldview, what is so-called predestination? Is everything set and where God knows exactly what I'm going to do and where I'm going to go after I die, that this is just a process that I'm acting a role in God's script?
Yes. These are very tough questions. So I think I do want to say God is in control over the course of history. Predestination can mean different things. I think the core of its meaning is that it's in some way going to be up to God what our final destiny is. So it's a very much a theological concept, tied up with questions of heaven and hell and the ultimate landing place that we find ourselves in. And the notion of predestination seems to be that is in some sense up to God. Now here's the question, and where various different views of predestination will depart. What exactly does it mean to say that it's up to God? Does saying that it's up to God mean that it's not also, in a very significant sense, up to us? I would want to say that it's up to both us and God. So the sense in which God is in control over the course of history, including where things finally end, is not going to be a sense where what happens necessarily or deterministically, right? We act freely, I think, and how we act could very well, I think, does play a role in what our destiny is going to be. So it's up to us, but it's up to God as well, in the sense that God is the source of the whole story. God is the source of the being of everything apart from himself, including creatures as they act.
Yeah, that sounds very logical, but let me ask it this way to try to puncture the logic. Would God ever decide that that individual is someone who is going to be elected, who's going to be sure, who's going to be in the afterlife in heaven, and that at that point, it's 100% sure that that person will make it?
I think it's the case that we could have something that we would call God's election of a particular individual. God's willing that individual, let's say, be in heaven.
Well, God's willing for everybody.
Right, for everybody.
I would hope.
Yeah. Well, we can say everybody or individual. Either way, you could interchange. For the point that I'm about to make, right? So I want to say that we can speak that way, and I think that affirm that. The way you were suggesting makes it sound like God makes some sort of decision about election that is independently of anything that we do or choose,
or cannot be changed,
that cannot be changed, and it can suggest a kind of determinism or a kind of a necessitation of our destiny in a way that makes it look like we have no say in the matter, nor no control. And I would want to resist that. I would want to look for an account that enabled us to affirm both God being the source of all things, including of all endings, personal endings, if you will, but would also allow us to affirm that we have a say, a genuine say.
Right. So let me give you that God's involved and we're involved. Yes. Is there ever any differences in the proportionality? Does God ever differentiate among individuals by putting an extra element that this person I'm going to more put my efforts on? So does God ever differentiate?
Well, I think so. I think if there are differences in creation, then God has done between two individuals. Let's say God has done something differently with one than with the other.
Yeah, but you're taller than I am, and doesn't bother me too much. But if God has an extra interest in you to give you eternal life in heaven and less in me, then that gets me a little aggravated.
Yeah, I wouldn't claim to know which individuals in the end God is favoring.
No, I'm not asking. I'm not asking you to do that. I'm asking you to say that does God ever differentiate?
Well, I would say if there are differences, then God differentiates.
But differentiates in a really important point.
In any sort of point, but including really important points. So including having to do with good,
eternal.
Whether someone is performing good acts or not, whether they are wind up in heaven or not, if there are, to the extent that there are differences, and I don't claim to be able to answer that question definitively, but what I would want to say is if there are differences there, then God is doing something differently because God is the source of all that's there, right?
It was one thing in being a passive source in the sense of God is the reason for people's existence and lives. The other is God making an affirmative will decision that person, Matthews, is going to have a 99% chance of making it, and Robert is going to have an 83% chance.
Right. When we think about setting up the chances for someone making it versus not, there it seems like we're talking about does God give antecedent help, let's say, to one person that's more than to another person, grace, we might say, that makes it more likely that this person land in the good place than the other person. It seems to me that something like that is certainly possible, and it seems to me could be the case.
If it were the case, would you feel good about that? I wouldn't feel particularly good. I'm not saying God couldn't do that, but I'm not sure that God would be a perfect being God.
It seems to me that I don't think grace is something or eternal life with God in heaven. I don't think this is something that God owes us. So to that extent, I don't think there's injustice in differentiating if God, in fact, differentiates. Just as doesn't seem to me to be injustice, to have someone who's your friend who you bestow favor on, and someone else who isn't, provided that that other person that you don't owe it to that other person.
So just because God is our creator, we would all appreciate if that were true, God can pick and choose who he wants and favor one over the other. It's like if you have children, you're favoring some children over the other in some really important sense, whether you pay for their college or you don't. I mean, that's very trivial compared to the questions we're talking about now.
Yeah, it seems to me that no human being has by nature, now this is a controversial claim, I admit.
I wouldn't be talking about it if it wasn't controversial.
But God doesn't owe us the beatific vision, it seems to me. So the beatific vision is a gift, right? And it's a gift God, I would love to give, as freely and distribute as widely as possible. That would be my preference. But it seems to me that God wouldn't be unjust in not giving the gift to anyone, right? Of eternal life.